So hey guys, what's up? Sol here. So ever since I've been building PCs, they've been evolving a long way. I remember actually my first PC was one that you had to plug into the TV because we couldn't afford one of the bigger like 286s or something like that back in the day. So essentially I had an Atari computer that would just plug into the TV and that was your monitor. And that was kind of my first foray into any kind of computers or computer gaming, was messing with that thing, and the really screwed up language is now the defunct Atari Basic. And it was kind of a blast to learn. A little bit hard for somebody who was like 6 years old at the time to grasp, but that was kind of the first time. I remember the keyboard being really bad on that thing. It was like really mushy. It was like you're typing on marshmallows or something. And then we got our first computer around the late 90s, and I remember that thing being this huge ATX box, like even bigger than what we have now today. It was just this huge beige ugly ass box, and I remember like looking inside of it and now knowing what I know, having cards for like everything you had to do in there, like, you know, add-in cards for the IO on the hard drives, the IO on the CD drives. There was a add-in card for sound, there was an add-in card for modem, there was an add-in card for graphics, and just the thing just being full to the brim of like different cards for different functionality. And then as time went on, a lot of those different functionalities got pared down, maybe not like the best possible way. Like I remember onboard audio being really crappy at first. For people who were just doing like basic computing, there was onboard graphics, but still not really all that great and whatnot. And then as eventually it got to the point where everything became pretty much on par with like the stuff that you would buy later on, like sound cards and whatnot, and in some cases even more so. And I remember like I had an epiphany in the mid 2000s that ATX wasn't really cutting it for me, because I pretty much had gotten to the point where I had a sound card and a graphics card. So it was like, I'm gonna go ahead and build a micro ATX machine and see if I can be perfectly happy on that. And of course, you know, what ended up happening was I had plenty of space for my graphics card, and I had plenty of space for my sound card. And then the onboard sound started getting almost on par with the sound cards, and I found that that wasn't even like fully necessary. So then I moved on to micro ATX. And then while I was on micro ATX, being happy, feeling like I had plenty of options there, and I didn't need what the you know, the big boy towers or anything like that anymore, I still noticed carrying it to LAN events over the past year or so, it's still a lot to carry. It's still a lot to go around with. And then thinking back, and it's like I've only SLI'd or crossfired ever once on a PC, and it was, well, twice if you count APUs. But I never had a really 100% what I would call great experience. I've had good experiences, but it's always been mixed. And it seems like with companies like Nvidia limiting their SLI capability to 2 cards, and a lot of the mainstream reviewers out there saying that it's cool that you can do it, but it causes a lot of problems. Maybe it's time to kind of forget about that option. Maybe it's not necessary, and saying that I've only ever used it once, and that the sound is pretty much damn well to the point where the integrated sound can be as good, or if not even better, than a dedicated sound card. Why do I need these extra slots? Maybe I just need one now. And so I started looking around. There's certain things I didn't want to give up. I still wanted to have water cooling on there. I still wanted to have good overclocking support, and I still wanted to, you know, be able to make content as quickly and whatnot as I could on my machine, have it load up as quick and whatnot. And as I started looking around, there was a lot of different cases. There's cases out there that are quite essentially just micro ATX cases that have been repurposed, where instead of the board sitting on its side, it's sitting flat. And it's like, what's the point of that? You're still carrying a box that's just as big. So I really wanted to crunch the box down to something I could carry onto a train, plane, something like that, right? And so, but I didn't want to lose out support for the water cooling, seeing I have a 240 rad for my i7. And so I kept on looking around, and eventually I think I found the case. So here's the review for the Fractal Design Core 500. So here's the Core 500. As you can see, it's about as small as a bread box or a small toaster oven. So if you're the type of person who needs to build an EATX board with a single graphics card to compensate for your ego, let's say, then this is obviously not going to be the case for you. As you can see, the Core 500 has got a similar DNA to the Node 304 to the point where Fractal Design actually says both cases have a similar capacity of 19.5 liters to fill all your doodads with. This case has up to 3 drive mounts, 3 for 3.5 inch and 3 for 2.5 inch. One of the 3.5 inches is located underneath the optical drive tray and the other one is located behind the front panel. The top of the front panel is adorned with the power reset switch, hard drive LED, audio jacks, and 2 USB 3.0 jacks. So now it's time for the build process. Time to crack open a Mountain Dew, roll up the sleeves, and get the computer together. So I had to transfer everything over from a micro ATX machine into this ITX box, and I want to give a quick shout out to Kyle over at Bitwit for sending me a Asus Maximus 6 Impact so I could replace it for my Gene, and it worked great for my 4790K, overclocked really well. Building in the case took me a little bit longer than it would normally would. I normally could put a computer together like within just a couple hours. I felt like I spent an extra hour on this because I have built ITX machines before, but they were typically like in BitPhoenix Prodigy cases, and it was just like a normal tower cooler or something like that. So they didn't take very long and they weren't very cramped. With this case, and the size that I was going for, trying to make this something that I could carry on a plane or something, it was a little bit more of a challenge, especially saying that it was a full-on computer with graphics card and everything, and then I had, on top of that, a 240 rad that had to go in there with the CPU cooling so I could keep my overclock of 4.6 gigahertz. So with the build done, we have a small machine that is under the 25-pound requirement of many airlines that could actually be considered a carry-on. And that's pretty amazing with an AIO full of water. So here's my old case, the Defy Mini, and it's been a great case through the years, very sturdy, still is, and I might possibly do another build in this, but for lands and stuff, it's just a little bit too much for me to carry, and as you can see, the Core 500 is quite significantly smaller. So the Core 500 measures in at 250 millimeters width, 213 millimeters height, and 380 millimeters depth, and only weighs 9.7 pounds or 4.4 kilograms with empty case. So there's plenty of room there for me to add parts and keep it below my 25-pound weight restriction. The Core 500 has a faux brush aluminum, so it is plastic on the front. However, on the sides it's adorned with small metal grills for air intake. Although you're probably not going to get much there, there is a dust filter on both those. The top of the Core 500 has been perforated to allow airflow for the top mount of the case, which allows two 120 or 140 millimeter airflow fans. Or you can put a quite thin radiator up there. You wouldn't want to stick a thick one, but it will allow 120, 140, 240, and 280 millimeter rads up in the top mount. The left side of the Fractal Core 500, there's airflow for your graphics cards. It will accommodate graphics cards up to 310 millimeters in length. However, if you're using a power supply that has more than 170 millimeters in length, it'll intrude into that compartment a little bit, and you'll only be able to fit a graphics card up to 170 millimeters in length. And seeing that's similar to the Node 304 with the front-mounted power supply, there is a exhaust vent on the right side of the case. The rear of the case has ports for your AC, your I/O ports, and 2 slots for a graphics card. Unfortunately, it will not accommodate a triple slot graphics card. Also in the rear you can see it has, the case is included with a 140mm Fractal Design Silent Series R3, which has a speed of around 500 RPM to 1000 RPM and is very, very quiet. With the exterior cover off, you can see that there's 2 magnetic dust filters for your graphics card and your intake for your radiator or just regular airflow. I will say on the top I had a little bit of a problem when there was like way too much like netting in there. It was just like kind of like too much slack for it or something. And I ran into a problem where if I had the fans top mounted on my rad, it would cause a rubbing sound when starting it up. Take a listen. On the bottom of the 500 is another dust filter for your power supply. Now it is non-magnetic, and I've heard some people complain that it falls out too easily or feels too loose. In my experience, once it's in there, it's snug enough that it's not going to be much of a problem unless you knock it or something during carrying. Here you can see my 240 rad mounted in the case with plenty of room. If you decide to go for air cooling, you still have room for 2 case fans and a air cooler up to 170mm in height. On the exposed right side of the case, you can see the support there for the power supply. Will support up to a ATX size power supply. Has a little extension cable, so we'll move the AC plug-in into the back there. You will have to make sure this is on before you put the panel on, obviously, or else you're going to have problems turning it on, and a lot of people kind of miss that. On the top we have the mounts for two 2.5 inch drives and 2 3.5 inch drives, which do have the rubber mounts to isolate vibration in this case. The thing I learned about building in this case is, depending on the power supply and where your AC plug is, in this case the Fractal Design Edison M is pretty far off to the left there, so it was a really snug fit. So I actually had to remove the power supply from the mount, plug it in, and plug it back in. So when you're doing your builds in these, make sure you go ahead and put the extension cable in first before actually mounting it, and that'll like save you a big headache. Here we have the rear I/O flush with the back of the case, which I absolutely love. I wish all cases would do this. It makes things so much easier to plug in. And just like one of those weird features that nobody thinks of that I love. So here you can see the mounting solution for the graphics cards. It's very similar to a lot of ITX cases out there. You have a single thumb screw and that piece will lift up and down, and you can add that pressure there will keep it mounted into the slot. I did have a little bit of wobble on this particular graphics card, so I went and stuck the screws in. However, on the new card that I just put in, the R9 290, it didn't have that problem, so I left the screws out. With the front panel off, you can see the third 2.5 inch drive mount. And you can rotate it either way. However, if you rotate it with the cables facing up, you will not be able to obviously fit a optical drive or anything else in that 5 1/4 bay. I decided to flip it the other way around because it made the cable management a little bit neater. It gave me an extra place to hide the cables, and it did take a little bit of effort and a little bit of bending to get them in there, but you can see it does work. Here we see the cable tie downs. They go from all the way to the rear of the case all the way up to the front side panel, and the run goes underneath the graphics card and up to the side there, that little spacing. A little tight, but it does work, and you can see I've got quite a few cables tied down here. So to finish this up, the only thing I could really find negative about this case was the dust filter rubbing up against on the top with the fan. Other than that, it doesn't have any vibrations. The build quality is very solid. And one of the things I've always found annoying about ITX building is a lot of cases have a lot of restrictions, ask a lot of you to make sure they're slimmed down and whatnot. And like for an instance, like SFX power supplies can cost quite a bit more than an ATX. Where this one doesn't do that, they've just moved it to the front and whatnot. And so even though this is just kind of like an extension on the Node 304, they've done a brilliant job adding on to that, in my opinion. Being able to remove the drive tray for water cooling, being able to keep it in and move the water cooling to like 120 in the back, do air cooling, just any kind of thing that you could think of. You don't have to use like ITX graphics cards in here. You can use like a full-length graphics card. It's just, they really hit it out of the park. And besides that one little issue, I really couldn't find much else wrong with it. And I'm really happy with this case. Alright guys, that's it for this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. It helps. Leave comments down below, and I will definitely see you in the next one. Okay, I know what you guys are thinking, what the important question is. As cool as this case is, it's 4.6 gigahertz, just under 1.26 volts. We got to hear the exhaust note on this thing. And don't worry, I did warm it up, so for all you people in the comments, no, it's not running cold. I'm not revving the fans up on a cold system. It has been warmed up, okay?